I stood there in my own living room, holding the cranberry sauce I'd made from scratch, as my daughter-in-law pulled out my dining chair and said, "We need space." Her smile was sweet, her meaning bitter. I watched as my grandson sat on a cushion while I stood like a stranger. At Christmas, in the home where I'd hosted 30 holidays, baked every pie, and buried every memory in the walls. So the next morning, while they were still sleeping, I called the movers and took my space back. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Maggie pulled into the driveway of her son's newly built craftsman home, gravel crunching beneath her tires like brittle bones. The place looked picture perfect, warm porch lights, tall windows glowing golden, but she couldn't shake the chill in her chest. Balanced carefully on the passenger seat was a pecan pie she'd baked that morning, the crust hand-crimped just like Evan liked it as a boy. She knocked once before letting herself in, as Vanessa had instructed last time. "We don't want the dog barking." There was no dog. There had never been a dog. Inside, the house buzzed with soft jazz and polished politeness. Vanessa appeared from the kitchen, perfectly manicured and holding a wine glass like an accessory. "Oh, Maggie, you're early," Vanessa said, lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I brought pie," Maggie said, lifting the tin as if it were a peace offering. "How thoughtful," Vanessa replied. "We already have 2 desserts, but I'll find room." She turned, not waiting for Maggie to follow, and disappeared into the kitchen. The dining room had been set like a magazine spread. White linens, gold-trimmed china, name cards, 6 chairs. Maggie hesitated at the threshold, noticing the empty spot between Evan and Lily, her 10-year-old granddaughter. No chair, just a gap. "Vanessa?" she called gently. "Is there an extra chair somewhere?" "Oh," Vanessa said, stepping in from the kitchen, brushing flourless hands on a spotless apron. "We downsized the table for space. Didn't think we'd need a 7th. Maggie blinked. I can grab one from the hallway." Vanessa gave a tight smile. "I'd rather not break the symmetry." Evan emerged behind her with a nervous laugh. "Mom won't mind, right? It's casual." Maggie's throat tightened. "Of course," she said quietly. Dinner began without fanfare. The family passed dishes clockwise as Maggie stood behind her granddaughter's chair, occasionally stepping back to avoid being jostled. No one offered her a seat. Her feet began to ache, but she smiled through it, nodding along to Vanessa's monologue about her new yoga studio and a planned trip to Santa Fe. Every so often, Maggie's eyes met Lily's across the table. The little girl frowned, glancing at the empty space where a chair should have been. Maggie gave her a small, reassuring nod. "Stay quiet. Be polite. Don't cause trouble." Vanessa lifted her glass midway through the meal, her smile wide and camera-ready. "To family," she said, "and to making room for the future." Everyone clinked glasses. Maggie held nothing. Her hands were still from stirring gravy half the afternoon. Evan barely looked her way. "Cheers," he mumbled, sipping his Pinot. Later, as the plates cleared and laughter grew louder, Maggie stood alone by the wall, hands clasped behind her back. Her knees ached. No one noticed, not even Evan, who now scrolled idly on his phone. In the kitchen, Vanessa's voice floated back. "Don't worry about the pie. I'll send her home with it." Maggie turned away. Her hands were trembling. Lily tugged on her sweater. "Grandma, you okay?" Maggie knelt, hiding her face for a moment in Lily's hair. "I'm just a little tired, sweetheart." As the family migrated to the living room, Vanessa turned with a half laugh. "There's room on the couch if someone doesn't mind the floor." Maggie watched her own reflection in the hallway mirror. Small, faded, easy to miss. She didn't say goodbye when she left. She didn't take the pie. That night, as the sky darkened over the quiet neighborhood, Maggie sat alone at her kitchen table, a mug of tea growing cold in her hands. Outside, the wind rustled the maple leaves like a whisper. She stared at the empty chair across from her. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Tomorrow," she whispered, voice low, steady. "I make room my way." The frost had already crept across Maggie's windshield by the time she reached the long bend near Route 219. Her wipers dragged tired arcs over the glass, the rubber screeching like a warning. She didn't turn on the radio. Silence suited her better tonight. More honest. She drove under a sky smothered in cloud, the moon no longer interested in watching. Her hands gripped the wheel harder than necessary. The steering wheel had worn spots. Years of use. Years of holding on. Vanessa's voice clung to her like stale perfume. "We didn't think we'd need a seventh. Don't break the symmetry. Making room for the future." The car's heater wheezed against the cold, but it wasn't her skin that was chilled. It was something deeper. The kind of cold you earn over time, one quiet insult at a time. Her son's laugh had hurt the most. Not cruel. Just absent. As if she were some inconvenient relic that had drifted into his home and stood too long. By the time she turned down her gravel driveway, the pie tin was still riding shotgun beside her, untouched. She didn't bother bringing it in. Inside, her old house groaned in the wind like it was trying to speak. She flicked on the foyer light, the dim yellow glow settling on family portraits she hadn't taken down, even when they stopped visiting. In one, Evan was 10, grinning through a missing tooth. His arm looped around her shoulders. His smile had belonged to her then. She unbuttoned her coat slowly, methodically, each snap like a tick on a countdown clock. Her footsteps echoed through the kitchen, past the empty table, down the hallway she hadn't repainted in 20 years. The safe box was where it had always been, beneath the loose floorboard in her bedroom closet. She hadn't opened it in a long time. Maybe part of her thought she never would again. She knelt, groaning a little from her knees, and pried up the board. The metal box came out cold and heavy. She placed it on the bed and opened it with the key she still wore on a chain under her sweater. Inside, deeds, trust documents, notarized letters from years past, even a yellowing will she'd rewritten twice since Evan got married. She took out the folder labeled property and began flipping through. Evan's name wasn't there, not on the deed, not on the trust. Vanessa's name, of course, was never even considered. Maggie leaned back against the headboard, a slow breath escaping her like a tire losing air. They hadn't even bothered to ask whose name was on the house. They'd just assumed it would be theirs. Assumed she'd fade quietly, like a light bulb dimming with time. Her fingers brushed the edge of a notepad tucked inside the folder. One sheet had been torn off. Her brows furrowed. Taped to the inside of the safe lid was a sticky note. Bright pink, like something from a child's school supply list. A single line written in childish print. "Grandma, you deserve better." Lily Maggie didn't cry. She sat there for a long time, the pink note in her lap. The papers fanned around her like pieces of a puzzle, finally forming an image she couldn't ignore anymore. For the first time in years, her mind didn't drift to regret, or guilt, or compromise. It moved with precision. She stood, crossed to the dresser, and pulled out her ledger. She began writing down names, dates, a list of calls she would make, conversations she would control, assets to shift, clauses to activate. By the time she closed the safe again, the house felt warmer, not from the heater, but from something sparking to life inside her. In the kitchen, the cold tea still sat untouched on the table. She dumped it down the sink. Then, she walked to the living room window, parting the curtains to peer out into the dark. The trees swayed like nervous witnesses. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime cried out. A brittle, metallic sound, too fragile to be ignored. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. Soft lines, thinning hair, but eyes that no longer looked uncertain. She whispered to no one. If they need space. Her fingers curled around the edge of the curtain. I'll give them mine, without them in it. The clock on the microwave blinked 12:17 a.m. in ghostly blue digits. Maggie stood barefoot in the kitchen, arms folded against the chill that seemed to radiate up through the old tile floor. The air felt still, thick with unspoken things. She didn't feel tired, just alert, sharpened. She picked up the landline instead of her cell. The old cordless handset still sat in its cradle beside the fridge, yellowed with age. She hadn't used it in months. Maybe that was why it felt right. She punched the number from memory. 3 rings. Tom's Hollett, a man's voice answered, gravelly with exhaustion. If this is a prank, I swear. Tom, she said, calm but firm. It's Maggie Harper. Silence. Then, Maggie? Maggie Harper from, damn, it's been a while. You okay? I need movers, she said. This morning, earliest you can. Wait, today? Yes. Lady, it's Christmas Eve. I know. A beat. Tom's voice lowered. You in some kind of trouble? Just the opposite, she replied. I'm about to clean house. That got a chuckle out of him. You serious? As a heart attack. I want the truck here by 8. Tom exhaled into the line. We've got holiday rates, you know. Maggie smiled faintly. Worth every penny. Another pause. Then Tom said, I'll wake up Robbie and Mac. They'll grumble, but I owe you one. You want the full crew? Just the truck and 2 guys. I'll handle the rest. You moving out or someone in? I'm making space, she said, voice even. Start fresh. He didn't press. All right then. See you at 8, Maggie. She hung up. The old house seemed to shift around her as if it, too, had been holding its breath. Maggie moved with a quiet efficiency, opening drawers, unlocking file cabinets, sorting what mattered from what didn't. The folder labeled Core went into her canvas tote bag. Inside, the deed, the trust, the will, birth certificates, social security cards, insurance documents. She added her ledger and the sticky note Lily had written, folding it neatly as if it were something sacred. In the hallway closet, she retrieved 2 suitcases, both scuffed and sun-faded from years of disuse. One for clothes, one for keepsakes, old photographs, her mother's rosary, a broken wristwatch Evan gave her on her 40th birthday. It hadn't worked in decades, but she'd never thrown it out. Upstairs, she packed slowly but with purpose. This wasn't about running away. This was about drawing a line and stepping past it. The phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, her cell this time. Lily. You okay, Grandma? Maggie stared at the message for a long second, heart-catching. She typed back, Maggie, better than I've been in years, sweetheart. 3 dots pulsed on the screen, then disappeared. No follow-up. That was all right. Lily had said what mattered. She always did. By 2 a.m., everything that needed to be done was done. What remained were just details. Coffee in the morning, locking the shed, setting out keys. She stepped outside onto the porch, bundled in a thick cardigan, the hem brushing her knees. Snow had started to fall, slow and deliberate, the kind of snow that silenced everything it touched. It layered the porch steps, dusted the railing, swirled in the porch light like powdered glass. Maggie stood there for a while, one hand on the banister, watching her yard blur into white. The house looked different in the snow, almost ghostly, like something from someone else's life. Behind her, the hall clock chimed. One long note, then silence. She didn't flinch. This wasn't nostalgia. It was closure. Back inside, she picked up her notebook and flipped to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote in steady pen, December 24th. Controlled exit underneath it, she drew a box around 3 words, no regrets allowed. She clicked the pen closed, slipped the notebook into her tote, and crossed to the living room. The chair by the fireplace, the one Evan built her the year he got married, was still there. She didn't sit in it. She looked down at it like it was a headstone. "You thought this was mine?" she murmured. "But you never really gave it." Snow thickened outside, clinging to the windows like frost-bitten fingers. Maggie walked to the center of the room, turned off every light, and stood alone in the dark, surrounded by memories she no longer served. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. "Tomorrow I move more than boxes." She turned toward the hallway, toward the stairs, toward the plan already ticking into motion. "I move my story." By the time the sun broke through the thinning clouds, Maggie was already dressed and waiting. The snow had stopped sometime after 4, leaving behind a dusting over the yard like a hush laid across everything. Her driveway glistened under the early light, thin ice beneath white powder, slick and uncertain. She'd salted it at dawn. No one was slipping today. At exactly 8:02 a.m., the truck pulled in. Tom's Hollet was painted in bold red letters across the box side, the lettering faded and chipped, but still proud. Behind the wheel, Tom gave her a brief, 2-fingered salute before hopping down onto the gravel in work boots older than some marriages. He looked broader than she remembered, grayer too, but his handshake was still warm and sure. "Maggie Harper?" he said, squinting against the sun. "You're a damn legend in this town." "And you're late," she replied, lips quirking. 2 minutes, he grinned. "I brought donuts." Behind him, Robbie and Matt climbed out of the cab, both young, both yawning, and began stretching as if preparing for battle. Tom turned serious. "We'll handle it." "I know you will," Maggie said. They got to work fast. The essentials came first. A cherry wood nightstand with a drawer that stuck unless you angled it just right. Her small writing desk, the armchair from her reading corner, wrapped gently in moving blankets like it meant something, which it did. Then came the boxes, labeled in careful Sharpie, photo albums, linens, mementos, docs. She stood near the porch, wrapped in her wool coat, directing traffic with pointed fingers and a quiet authority that felt newly earned. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. They followed her lead like a ship's crew, taking orders from the one person who actually knew where they were headed. Halfway through the loading, Tom walked over with his clipboard. "You got a second destination listed here," he said, thumbing through the forms. "This address in Haddon Hill. That your son's place?" She nodded once. He glanced at the second set of boxes still inside, neatly stacked but unlabeled. Furniture, unused kitchenware, spare decor. Framed prints Maggie never liked. The neutral throw pillows Vanessa insisted on during her last visit. "All of it to Haddon Hill?" he asked. Maggie didn't blink. "All of it. Leave it on their lawn if you have to." Tom raised his eyebrows. "You sure?" "They want space," she said, voice like a clean cut of glass. "Let them have mine." He gave a short nod and signaled to the boys. "Round 2's going to Haddon Hill. Let's move." By 9, the house had changed. The air inside felt hollow, like a building recently exercised. Maggie stood in her now bare living room, hands on her hips, watching as they wrapped the last of the ottoman and carried it through the front door. She didn't cry. She didn't pause. She stepped outside to see Lily standing on the porch steps, arms crossed, phone pointed at the movers. The girl's breath came out in clouds, her boots barely dusted with snow. "Mom thinks I'm at Reagan's," Lily said without looking up. She's too busy yelling about the tree being lopsided. Maggie almost smiled. You snuck out? No, Lily said. I escaped. One of the movers hoisted a box onto his shoulder, marked MISC, decor, and Lily tilted her phone for a better shot. She filmed it silently, methodically. I want proof, Lily said, eyes glinting. So one day, when she pretends this never happened, I can show her. Maggie walked over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her granddaughter's ear. You're smarter than they know. They don't know anything, Lily muttered. From behind them, the truck door slammed shut. All set, Tom called out. Maggie nodded. Send me the invoice later. As the truck rumbled to life, its wheels kicked up gravel and snow, trailing a cold gust across the porch. Maggie watched it pull away, turning right at the end of the road, headed straight for the cul-de-sac that had tried to erase her. Lily tucked her phone into her jacket pocket. Maggie's eyes stayed fixed on the road. If they think I'm excess, she said, almost to herself. She turned, stepping back into her emptied home, its walls echoing like a theater after closing night. Let them live with it. Haddon Hill sat glazed in morning light and money, the kind of cul-de-sac where holiday wreaths matched house paint, where delivery drivers knew not to park too long, where appearances mattered more than conversations. Vanessa Hale opened the door in a silk robe and smudged mascara. Her coffee was still steaming, her smile only half-formed, then gone. A 20-foot moving truck loomed at the curb. Two men in jackets marked Tom's Haulet stood on her pristine stone walkway, each with a dolly stacked in boxes. Can I help you? She asked, pulling the robe tighter, voice already climbing. Tom stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Morning, ma'am. Delivery for Mr. and Mrs. Hale, direct from Maggie Harper. Behind her, the glass entryway reflected her shock like a mirror split in two. Excuse me? Evan padded into view from the kitchen, barefoot, sipping his own mug. He wore sweatpants and confusion. What's going on? Your mother sent a delivery, Tom said. Truckload. All documented. Says here. He tapped the clipboard. Essential non-essentials. I didn't ask for anything, Evan said, frowning. You didn't have to, Tom replied. She signed for both addresses. Says it's your property now. Vanessa's voice cracked. Property? We don't need anything, especially not her stuff. She said you wanted space, Tom said simply. She's giving it. One of the movers rolled past with a box marked kitchen, excess, and paused at the threshold. Vanessa stepped back like it was radioactive. You can't just... This is not okay, she snapped. Tom raised an eyebrow and held up the signed contract, Maggie's signature scrawled cleanly at the bottom. It's all here. You want to dispute it? Call her? Otherwise, we've got a full offload to complete, and we're already behind. Another dolly came up the walk, this time with framed art, a vintage standing lamp, and two decorative pillows in colors Vanessa had once called outdated coastal. Evan rubbed his temple. Jesus, Mom, what the hell are you doing? The men didn't stop. The foyer filled with stacked cardboard and bubble wrap. By the time Vanessa realized they were setting things in the house, not on the lawn, her living room was already buried in beige boxes and secondhand silence. Not here, she snapped. Not in my home. Tom gave a small shrug. We don't take returns, ma'am. Per contract, your address was the drop zone. She spun toward Evan. Do something. He looked helpless. It's legally binding. I mean, she owns everything she just gave us. Vanessa stormed toward the boxes, ripped open the nearest one. Inside, a fake ivy arrangement Maggie once kept in the hallway, a dusty casserole dish, and a stack of books. Agatha Christie, cover-worn. This is garbage. Tom raised a brow. She said it was part of the inheritance. Inheritance? Vanessa barked. Is she dying? Tom smiled. Not that she mentioned. Just then, another vehicle pulled up behind the truck. A silver sedan. Maggie stepped out. No coat. Just a dark green sweater. Straight-leg jeans. Leather gloves. Her hair was pulled back. Her face calm. She walked slowly up the stone path like someone arriving at a gala she wasn't invited to, but owned. Vanessa's mouth dropped open. "What is this? A stunt?" "No," Maggie said. "This is delivery." "You're dumping your crap on us?" Maggie looked past her, into the foyer, where her old ottoman now sat between two overpriced side tables like a misfit child. "I'm not dumping. I'm transferring. Everything you treated as clutter now belongs to you." "You can't do this!" Evan stepped forward. "Mom, seriously, this is insane. We don't have room for any of this." Maggie's eyes locked onto him. "Funny. That's exactly what I was told." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Tom handed over the final receipt. "All yours. No charge. She paid premium." Maggie took one step closer, leaned slightly to peer inside her old framed mirror now leaning against their foyer wall. Her reflection stared back, steady, unafraid. Vanessa's voice shook with rage. "What do you want from us?" Maggie smiled. "Nothing," she said. Vanessa's lip curled. "Then why?" Maggie turned away, stepping back onto the sidewalk. The cold bit her cheeks, but she didn't flinch. She paused beside the truck, looked up at Lily, still filming from the passenger seat. Without turning back, Maggie spoke just loud enough for them to hear. Chairs moved. The truck engine roared to life. Tables turned. Elaine Carter's office didn't look like a law firm. It looked like someone's grandmother had gone rogue and opened a legal practice inside a former bakery. Floral curtains, ticking clock, mismatched mugs. But Maggie had heard the stories, that Elaine never lost, never shouted, and never forgot a detail. It was exactly the kind of place where someone like Maggie could breathe. "You came prepared," Elaine said, setting down her tea with a soft clink. Maggie reached into her canvas tote and laid the documents out across the table. The deed came first, then the notarized trust, tax statements, property records. Everything clean, everything signed. Maggie's name sat on each line like a signature of survival. Elaine leaned forward, reading in silence, red pen in hand. Maggie waited. She didn't fidget. She didn't ask if anything looked wrong. She knew it didn't. After a long pause, Elaine glanced up over her reading glasses. "Well," she said, "this makes things simple." Maggie tilted her head. "How simple?" Elaine smiled faintly. "They have no claim. Not even a whisper of one. And if they try, then we'll whisper back, with paperwork." Maggie let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It left her slow and warm, like the way whiskey settles in the belly. Elaine tapped a red nail on the deed. "You understand what this means, don't you? That I'm free? That you're owed." Elaine slid a second document across the desk. "Technically, they've lived there rent-free for over a year. You're entitled to retroactive rent, utilities, possibly property wear." Maggie blinked. "I don't want their money." "Then don't cash the checks," Elaine said. "But you should demand them. Not because you need the funds, because you deserve the record." A small silence bloomed. Maggie nodded slowly. Elaine opened a leather folder. "Now, about your other file?" Maggie reached again into her tote and pulled out Lily's flash drive, clearly labeled. She passed it over like a sacred object. Elaine inserted it into her laptop. The screen lit up. It was Lily's footage. Clean, handheld, steady. Vanessa laughing as Maggie stood awkwardly behind the table. Evan scrolling his phone. That single, sour moment Vanessa toasted to family, making room for the future as Maggie stood without a plate in her hands. Elaine's lips pressed into a line. May I keep a copy? Yes, Maggie said. Lily wanted that. The older woman watched for another minute, then closed the laptop with careful intent. We'll attach this as emotional context if we file civilly, or just let it sit quietly in our pocket. People behave better when they know what's been recorded. Maggie folded her hands on her lap. Will they see it? Only if you want them to. Elaine began drafting a new document with swift, assured strokes. For now, this is all they'll see. She turned to the screen. The header read, Cease and desist notification, unlawful residency and harassment of grantor. This stops them from stepping foot back in your house, Elaine explained. It also makes clear that any attempt to dispose of your property or manipulate family assets will trigger full legal review. Maggie read each line, clear, firm, quietly devastating. Elaine watched her. You okay? Maggie nodded, but slower this time. Something inside her was shifting, like muscle waking up after too long a sleep. I feel, she said carefully, like I'm standing in my own skin again. Elaine smiled. Let them bark, you've got the leash. They stood. Maggie reached for her tote, now neatly refilled. Elaine handed her 2 envelopes, one to mail, one to hand deliver. As Maggie stepped into the cold outside, the December air didn't bite as sharply. She walked back to her car with purpose, every step planting roots instead of trailing echoes. She opened the driver's side door, slid behind the wheel. Lily's note still sat in the cup holder beside her, the one with the pink ink that read, You deserve better. Maggie looked down at the envelope in her hand. The legal cease and desist now addressed to the house that once made her invisible. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. Instead, she whispered, Papers speak louder than tantrums. The envelope was already torn before Evan made it halfway down the stairs. Vanessa stood in the entryway, still in her sleep shorts and last night's eyeliner, clutching the ripped cease and desist like it was a personal insult etched in acid. This is war, she snapped. Your mother just declared war. Evan took the papers from her, flipping through with furrowed brows. Jesus, he muttered. This thing looks airtight. Vanessa spun around the foyer like a tethered animal. She's not allowed to ban us from the house. My house. It's not your house. Vanessa stopped. What? Evan exhaled. Legally, it's not ours. You know that. We never transferred anything. She never signed anything over. She was supposed to. Well, she didn't. Vanessa's hands shook as she snatched the papers back. No lawyer talks to me like this. We're fighting it. Every single line of it. You want to sue her? She's already suing us. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. Technically, it's just a warning letter. I don't care what it is. I care what it looks like. Across the street, Maggie knelt beside a frostbitten flower bed, slowly tipping a watering can over the roots of her dormant hostas. The water hissed as it hit the cold earth, steam rising in soft spirals. She didn't look up once. Vanessa slammed the door shut, then flung it open again. She was pacing now, barefoot on cold tile, backlit by a chandelier that somehow made her tantrum look theatrical. She's humiliating us. In front of the whole damn neighborhood. And she wasn't wrong. 2 houses down, Mrs. Johansson stood behind her lace curtain, eyes narrowed over her bifocals. Across the street, the Halper twins, home from college, were filming from their Jeep, pretending to be on a call. Maggie didn't need to glance over to know how many windows were suddenly open. Vanessa turned on Evan. Say something, do something. He held up the paper. What do you want me to do? She's got everything. The documents, the footage, the deed. She's been planning this. Lily sat at the edge of the driveway with her phone propped against her knee. Quiet, unnoticed. She didn't say a word. Just let the camera roll. The argument behind her swelled and shrank like a wave circling a drain. She's trying to ruin us, Vanessa hissed, eyes wild. She's making us look like parasites. Evan looked away. Because she already had. Back across the street, Maggie rose, dusted her knees, and adjusted the cuffs of her sweater. Her plants didn't need watering, not really. But tending to them made her feel rooted, present, and it gave the neighbors something to focus on besides Vanessa's spiral. Lily shifted her camera slightly, making sure her grandmother was in frame now too. The contrast was undeniable. Inside the house, a box toppled over as Vanessa kicked it. Its contents, old linens and a chipped ceramic rooster, spilling onto the floor. This is hers. All of it. She's dumping her mess and painting us like the villains. She doesn't have to paint anything, Evan said under his breath. Vanessa whirled on him. What did you say? He didn't repeat it. Outside, Lily pressed pause. She glanced at her grandmother, who had just started trimming back the dead stalks of last year's roses. Maggie moved like someone who'd lived in storms, someone who now welcomed the silence after thunder. She's ruining us! Vanessa screamed, the front door wide open now, the sound carrying down the street like sirens at midnight. Maggie's shears clipped one last stem. She whispered, not to anyone, just to herself, to the wind, maybe to the earth. They forgot, she said, placing the shears back into her apron pocket. Her eyes lifted, calm, controlled. It was their ruin first. The dining room table, once cluttered with Christmas cards and forgotten catalogs, now held only one thing, a folder, thick, labeled, ready. Maggie sat beside it, reading glasses perched low, pencil in hand. She wasn't writing, just drawing slow circles in the margins of her notepad. The pencil moved, but her thoughts circled faster. Elaine sat across from her, sipping her usual herbal tea. Her hair was pinned back today, her earrings tiny silver gavels that swayed when she nodded. You've got this, she said gently. I'm not a speech person, Maggie murmured. I bake pies. I mail birthday cards on time. I tend to my garden. And you'll do that after, Elaine replied. But first, we speak. Not because you like the sound of your own voice, but because they need to hear what it sounds like when it's not afraid. On the other side of the room, Lily sat cross-legged on the rug, laptop open, earbuds in. She was scrubbing through video clips with practiced fingers, pausing, trimming, splicing. The chair, the toast, the mover's rolling boxes labeled kitchen, excess onto her parents' pristine hardwood. Lily layered in a slow fade between the footage, Maggie standing behind the table with no seat, then standing on her own porch, issuing orders to movers who followed without question. No narration, just reality. I cut the music out, Lily said without looking up. Didn't need any. Elaine watched the footage with one raised brow. She's got a knack for editing. She gets it from her grandpa, Maggie said quietly. He used to do AV for the school board. Elaine offered a soft smile. Well, she's documenting the new school board right now. Outside, sleet tapped lightly against the windows, steady, like a metronome. The sky had turned the color of wet paper. Maggie reached for the folder, flipping it open again. Copies of the deed, the cease and desist, the footage summary, the statement she and Elaine had rehearsed 3 times already. Her throat tightened anyway. I'm worried I'll lose it in the room, she said. Elaine leaned in. Then let yourself shake, and keep speaking. Before Maggie could respond, there was a knock at the door. 2 short, 1 long. She knew it before she even stood up. Pastor Daniels stood on her porch, bundled in his long wool coat, scarf tucked neatly into the collar. His gloved hands held a thermos and a small paper bag. Brought cinnamon scones, he said. Didn't think you'd have much appetite, but it's something warm. You always knew what to bring, Maggie replied. He stepped inside, letting the door shut behind him. His eyes scanned the room. Lily's editing, Elaine's folders, Maggie's posture. And he nodded, as if confirming something for himself. "You look steady," he said. "I don't feel it." "You don't have to," he replied. "You just have to be it for 5 minutes." She looked down. He stepped closer, voice gentler now. "You're not there to fight. That's what they're expecting. Noise, blame, chaos. You bring your calm. Let them bring their noise." Maggie exhaled slowly. The weight in her chest didn't disappear, but it shifted, redistributed itself. It no longer pressed her down. It braced her spine. Across the room, Lily clicked export on the final cut of the video. "Done," she said, holding up the flash drive. "Ready when you are." Elaine stood, gathering her briefcase. "Let's do this." Maggie reached for the folder. She tucked Lily's flash drive into the front pocket, then zipped the case closed with quiet finality. She walked over to the mirror in the hall, not for vanity, just alignment. Her scarf was straight, her coat sharp. Her reflection was no longer small. Outside, sleet had turned to snow again, light, crystalline, cleansing. She stepped onto the porch and paused. Her hands didn't tremble. Her knees didn't lock. Not this time. "I'm not walking in to argue," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Elaine nodded. "Exactly." Maggie's eyes narrowed toward the distant neighborhood building where the meeting would be held. Bright lights, folding chairs, and judgment waiting in neat rows. She gripped the folder a little tighter and whispered, "This time, I won't be standing without a chair." The community hall smelled like old varnish and weak coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, giving everything a slightly yellow tint, like time was pressing too close. Folding chairs had been arranged in half-moon rows, most already filled with neighbors wearing puffy coats and wary expressions. At the front, a table with a white plastic tablecloth separated the board from the rest of the room. Maggie sat quietly in the third row, folder on her lap, hands steady. Elaine sat beside her, glasses perched low, legal pad balanced on her knee. Lily, in a charcoal hoodie and jeans, waited near the side wall, laptop bag slung across her chest. She looked like any teenager, except her eyes were dead serious. Whitaker, the neighborhood chair and self-declared town peacemaker, tapped the mic. It squealed. He cleared his throat. Next on the agenda, community concern regarding the Hale residents at 114 Hollow Bend Drive. We've had inquiries, complaints, tensions. He glanced down, visibly uncomfortable. We'd like to, resolve those constructively. Before he could say more, Vanessa stood. Hair blown out. Heels too loud for linoleum. Rage masked as poise. "Let's be clear," she said, voice crisp. "This is about Maggie Harper, my husband's mother, who's been causing a very public disruption to what should have been a private family matter." Murmurs stirred. Someone near the back, Mrs. Johansson probably, clicked her tongue. "She's been unstable," Vanessa continued. "Erratic, vindictive, showing up uninvited, inserting herself where she's no longer welcome." Evan stood beside her, arms crossed. "She left the house for months. The yard was overgrown, the taxes went unpaid. She's not fit anymore." Elaine scribbled a note but said nothing. "She refuses to move on," Vanessa said, pacing now. "Worse, she's weaponizing personal family conflict in front of neighbors, posting videos, sending trucks, involving lawyers. And we believe," she looked around the room, "we believe she's trying to manufacture public sympathy to mask instability." Gasps didn't come right away, but they would. Maggie didn't rise. She didn't even blink. Instead, Lily walked forward, flash drive in hand. Elaine met her halfway, took it gently, and passed it to Whitaker with only 4 words. "Please project this now." Whitaker hesitated, then inserted the drive. The lights dimmed. The screen at the front of the room lit up with Lily's edited video. Silent, clean, undeniable. Vanessa smiling, Maggie standing, no seventh chair, Evan looking away. The toast. To family, making room for the future. Then the truck. The movers. The boxes marked kitchen. Excess rolling into Vanessa's curated house. Maggie standing tall on the sidewalk as Vanessa flailed in the doorway. Silence followed. Then a slow, collective exhale. No one looked at Maggie. They didn't have to. They were all looking at Vanessa. Whitaker cleared his throat. Is there context to that clip? Vanessa flushed. It was a moment out of context. She was late. She didn't RSVP. She brought pie, someone muttered. Vanessa spun. Excuse me? Elaine stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. In addition to that footage, she said, placing 2 printed copies of the deed and trust agreement on the board's table. My client holds sole ownership of the property in question. She has been harassed, defamed, and unlawfully pressured by individuals who had no legal claim to the home. She slid forward the second document. Cease and desist orders were delivered on December 24th. All compliant, all enforceable. Whitaker leaned in, adjusting his glasses. This is thorough. She's been patient, Elaine said. But patience doesn't erase record. Vanessa's voice broke. She's trying to destroy us. Elaine didn't blink. She's reclaiming what's hers. Maggie finally looked up. She didn't stand. She didn't wave. She met Evan's eyes and saw what she hadn't seen in years. Fear. The room buzzed low. Phones buzzed louder. No one was whispering anymore. They were typing, posting, watching. The moment was sealed. Maggie opened her folder, removed nothing, just rested her hand on top. She whispered softly, but not so softly that Lily couldn't hear. Neighbors know what papers prove. The lights came back on with a low flicker, humming back to life like nothing had changed. But everything had. Vanessa remained standing, her arms folded tight across her chest, lips pressed into a line that quivered just slightly. Evan had slunk back into his seat, jaw tight, gaze locked somewhere near the floor. At the front of the room, Whitaker adjusted the microphone and tapped his gavel once. Not loud, just enough to reclaim structure. The board, he said, voice steady now, has reviewed the materials presented and the documentation provided by Ms. Carter. He looked to Elaine, who gave a polite nod but didn't speak. The matter of legal ownership is clear. But, since this dispute has affected the tone of our community and undermined board function, we are also voting on temporary standing privileges. Vanessa jerked forward. Temporary? Whitaker ignored her. We'll take a simple majority vote. Maggie Harper's standing as property owner, resident emeritus, and voting HOA member. Shall it be affirmed? Hands rose, almost all at once. No hesitation, no calculation. Motion carried, Whitaker said, scribbling it down. Vanessa turned, eyes wild. You're siding with her? She owns the house, someone said. She earned it, came another. Whitaker cleared his throat. Now, on the matter of Mr. Fau and Mrs. Hale's board participation, given the conflict of interest, lack of legal claim, and recent attempts to mislead this body. He didn't need to finish. Hands went up again, fewer this time, but still a clear majority. Vanessa's voice cracked. You can't vote us out. It's not a removal, Whitaker said, almost gently. It's a suspension of privileges until further notice, effective immediately. Unbelievable, Vanessa hissed, whipping around toward the room. She set us up. She planned this. The crowd didn't react. No one corrected her. No one agreed. It was Maggie who finally stood, calm, measured, composed. No, she said simply. You set the table. Her gaze swept across the room, then settled back on Vanessa. I just brought the chair. A beat of silence, then a soft ripple of laughter. Not mocking, not cruel. Just the kind of quiet acknowledgement that truth, when spoken plainly, can cut cleaner than any insult. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. Evan put a hand on her arm. She shook it off. Whitaker tapped his gavel again. The matter is closed. And it was. The room relaxed. People stood. Coats were shrugged on. Voices returned to casual tones. But everything was different now. Elaine packed her legal pad without a word. Lily approached the front. Flash drive tucked back into her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Maggie stepped down from the front, her folder still untouched. She didn't need the documents anymore. Not tonight. She met Lily near the back of the room, the girl's arms wrapped around her before a word was said. "Proud of you," Lily whispered, face pressed into Maggie's coat. Maggie held her tight, not for support, just connection. As the crowd dispersed, Vanessa and Evan lingered by the exit, unsure where to stand now that the spotlight had turned off. Neighbors passed them in silence. No one made eye contact. Outside, the air had turned colder. But it was clean. The kind of cold that clears the lungs, not chokes them. As Maggie stepped out beneath the halo of the overhead streetlight, she paused to glance back. Just once. Vanessa stood framed in the doorway, arms still crossed. But her stance had changed. Not proud. Just small. Maggie turned back toward the sidewalk where Lily was waiting. Elaine walked beside them now, quiet and satisfied. The path ahead wasn't long, just straight. They walked without speaking for a while, the snow soft beneath their feet. Then, as they reached the edge of the lot, Maggie said it. Not loudly, but clear enough that the wind caught it and carried it back toward the hall. They lost their seat at the table. Elaine called just after 7 a.m., voice clipped but calm. "Maggie," she said, "we've got a new one." Maggie sat up in bed, pulse rising. "What is it?" "Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. Your address is listed as for sale by owner." Maggie blinked. "That's impossible. You didn't list it," Elaine cut in. "We know. I've already flagged it through the legal channel and started takedowns. But you'll want to stay offline for a bit. It's loud." She hung up before Maggie could reply. By the time Maggie slipped into her slippers and padded to the kitchen, her phone was already buzzing. 10 new messages. 4 voicemails. 6 missed calls. She didn't answer any. Instead, she opened the back door, stepped into the sharp morning air, and sat on the porch steps with a blanket draped across her shoulders. It was colder than she'd dressed for, but the silence steadied her. 10 minutes later, the screen door creaked again. Lily stepped out, phone in hand, mouth pressed into a tight, straight line. "He posted it," she said flatly. "Dad." Maggie looked up. "You're sure?" It was his Reddit account. Same one he used to argue about lawn care rules and politics in town. Lily held up her phone. He called it a senior property transition opportunity. Tagged it with motivated to sell, and even uploaded pictures, your pictures, from when you staged the house for holiday cards. Maggie's throat tightened. Lily sat beside her. The caption said, "Great for flipping, comes with baggage." She paused. "He meant you." Maggie didn't speak, just closed her eyes. "I reported it," Lily said. "Elaine already got it removed, but screenshots are everywhere. Facebook groups, HOA forums. He made it look like you were finally stepping aside." "And the comments?" Lily hesitated. "They're fighting back." She tapped a few times, held the screen up. The community had turned, swiftly. "This is disgusting. She's the only one with integrity in that family. Didn't they just lose their board seat? You can't evict the owner, bro. Embarrassing." One user posted, Imagine getting kicked out of a vote and trying to sell the house you don't own. Someone else added a photo. Maggie watering her frostbitten flower bed, still and dignified, captioned, "The only adult in the room." Maggie stared at the screen for a long moment. A breath escaped her chest, shaky, but not weak. Then Lily grinned, dark and sharp. Vanessa just deleted her Instagram. Maggie raised a brow. Mid-rant, Lily added. She was trying to defend it, said it was a symbolic listing, called you a squatter on your own porch. Did anyone believe her? They ratioed her in under 4 minutes. A silence fell between them. Snow had started again, thin and floating, more decorative than dangerous. Maggie stood. "Can you help me print the comments?" Lily's brow furrowed. "Why?" "I want a record," Maggie said. "Not for court. For myself." Lily nodded. "Done." Inside, Maggie poured herself a cup of coffee. The mug was chipped at the rim, one of the few things she hadn't boxed up or replaced. She liked it that way. Flawed. Earned. The news of the fraudulent listing would fade eventually, but the screenshots wouldn't, and neither would the fact that, when given another chance to choose decency, Evan had chosen spite. Vanessa, petty. Evan, cowardly. And Maggie, unshaken. As the printer hummed in the next room, Maggie stared out the window. Snow blurred the sidewalk, softened the world again. Lily walked back in and placed a small stack of freshly printed pages on the table. Maggie ran her hand over the paper, then tapped one line. "She built that house. They just tried to list it." She smiled. Only faintly, but it reached her eyes this time. Then she whispered. Not with anger, not even with pride. Just quiet, knowing clarity. They sold their dignity cheaper than furniture. The squad car pulled up just after 10 a.m., tires crunching softly over the packed snow. Its lights weren't flashing, but the presence alone was enough to draw curtains aside and slow dog walkers mid-stride. Evan opened the door in a hoodie and mismatched socks. Deputy Knox stood at the bottom step, clipboard in one hand, leather gloves tucked into the other. His tone was measured but unimpressed. "Evan Hale?" Evan stiffened. "Yeah. We've received a formal fraud complaint. Online property listing, residential address associated with you, filed and verified by counsel." Evan blinked. Look, I don't know what you're talking about." Knox tilted his head slightly, unimpressed. "So, you didn't post this?" He flipped the clipboard to show a printed screenshot. Evan's Reddit handle, the photos, the listing title. Evan's mouth opened, then shut. Behind him, Vanessa stepped into view in a robe and rage. "What is this?" The deputy didn't raise his voice. "This is an investigation of fraudulent intent tied to an illegal property listing. One more word from either of you and it becomes obstruction." Vanessa took a step forward. "She sent you, didn't she? That witch across the street." "Ma'am," Knox said flatly, "she's trying to ruin us. She's weaponizing this whole neighborhood." Knox didn't flinch. "You listed a home you do not own, using internal family photos, and labeled it as a distressed sale." "It was satire," Evan said quickly, voice rising. "Symbolic. Like commentary." Knox made a mark on his clipboard. Symbolic fraud still counts as fraud. Vanessa shoved the door wider. "This is harassment. We're the victims here." She reached for the handle and slammed it shut. From across the street, Maggie didn't move. She sat on her porch swing with a mug of black tea, wrapped in a gray shawl, watching it unfold with the same quiet composure she'd worn at the community hall. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just watched. Lily crouched beside the porch railing, phone low, recording steadily. Her breath fogged in front of her, but her hand never shook. The camera caught everything: Knox stepping back to his vehicle, Evan mumbling something through the now closed door, neighbors pausing on their walks to nod subtly in Maggie's direction. No one crossed the street. No one questioned whose side the law stood on now. Elaine arrived minutes later, stepping from her car in snow boots and a navy peacoat. She joined Maggie on the porch, offering a quiet nod as she sat. "Sheriff's office was already working with Digital Crime Division," she said. "Turns out Evan's account was flagged 6 months ago for unrelated trolling." "Of course it was," Maggie murmured. "They'll issue a formal warning. One more slip and it's criminal, not civil." Maggie sipped her tea. "So this ends soon?" Elaine gave a slight smile. "They're running out of ground to stand on." Lily stood, brushing snow from her knees. "Video's already up. The forums are eating it alive. Someone overlaid circus music." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Tactful. Effective," Lily corrected. Across the street, the blinds in the Hale living room snapped shut. Maggie leaned back in the swing. The wood creaked under her, soft and familiar. The cold air bit at her knuckles, but she didn't retreat inside. Not yet. She looked toward the snow-covered yard, the street she'd shoveled 100 winters, the porch steps she'd painted twice by hand. She'd built her life here. They'd tried to erase it with a listing, and now the law had taken their name off the board and, maybe off the record. She turned to Elaine. "I kept asking myself what made them this cruel." Elaine shook her head. "They weren't made cruel. They were just never stopped before." Lily tucked her phone away. "Not anymore." And Maggie, eyes steady, voice quiet, said the thing she'd been holding in since the moment she saw that fake "for sale" sign light up her inbox. They dug deeper. She paused, then turned her eyes toward the closed front door across the street. Law carried the shovel. The sanctuary smelled of old wood polish and peppermint. Someone had left hard candies in the hymn racks again. Winter light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting fractured color over the pews and carpet. Pastor Daniels adjusted his microphone at the pulpit, clearing his throat. "Before we close today," he said, "I've invited someone to share a few words. Not a sermon, a story." Whispers fluttered across the congregation. In the second pew, Maggie folded her gloved hands tighter. Her folder rested on her lap again, but this time, not as armor. Just reminder. She wore a simple gray sweater under her peacoat, hair neatly pinned back, calm as the winter outside. Daniels gestured toward her with a warmth that needed no elaboration. "Maggie Harper, would you come up here, please?" Maggie stood, slow but sure, not rushed, not reluctant. Lily gave her a small, firm nod as she passed. Her boots made soft thuds against the old wood floor as she approached the pulpit. A man in the third row whispered to his wife, but was shushed before he finished. Maggie took a breath, then another. "I was asked," she began, "to speak about resilience, about survival, maybe, about what it means to keep standing when the world shrinks around you." She let her gaze move gently across the room, not confrontational, just present. "I thought a lot about chairs," she said, lips tugging slightly at the corner. "Funny thing, a chair's a small thing, easy to take for granted, until the moment someone decides you don't deserve one." A murmur moved through the pews. No one stirred. "I was told once," Maggie continued, "that making room for the future meant removing the past. That dignity had an expiration date. That love came with caveats, and legacy came with leases." She held the edges of the pulpit, and I believed them. For a while. I stood through dinners. I stepped aside in photos. I watered plants on porches that didn't feel like mine. I swallowed my voice so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Now, she smiled. Barely, but it reached deep. Then I realized, If you stand too long in silence, people start calling it consent. A few heads bowed, a sniffle in the second to last pew. So I did what I knew how to do. I spoke. I showed up. I kept the receipts. I brought my own chair. A ripple of soft laughter, a few nods. I don't want revenge. I don't want applause. I just want what was mine before it became inconvenient. At that moment, the side door creaked open. Vanessa and Evan slipped in, dressed in black, late by 20 minutes. They paused in the rear aisle, unsure where to sit. The back pews were full. The only open seats were near the front. They remained standing. Maggie didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge. She kept her voice low but unwavering. We live in a world where women my age disappear the moment we stop being useful, she said. But usefulness and worth are not the same thing. They never were. A silence fell so thick it felt physical. And so, Maggie said, straightening, I will sit now, not because I'm tired, but because I earned the right not to stand. She turned from the pulpit, stepped carefully down the 3 carpeted steps, and walked toward the front row. There, centered, marked with a single white ribbon, was her seat. Someone had placed a small bouquet on it. No note, just daffodils. Out of season. Intentional. She sat, not tentative, not apologetic, present. The congregation rose in soft applause. Not thunderous, just steady, respectful. Lily was already recording from the aisle, tears drying on her cheeks. Vanessa, in the back, clenched her purse tighter. Evan looked toward the floor again. Pastor Daniels returned to the pulpit, his voice gentler now. The first shall be last, he said, quoting without theatrics, and the last lifted first. He closed his Bible. Service dismissed. People lingered. Some walked up to shake Maggie's hand. Others simply nodded as they passed, as if saying, We saw. We understand now. Maggie remained seated. Lily knelt beside her. You did it, she whispered. No, Maggie said, watching Evan and Vanessa shuffle quietly out the side door. Unseen and unacknowledged. They did it. They shrank the table. She turned her gaze to the sanctuary, its warmth, its room, its rows. And my place grew. The locksmith finished tightening the final screw and stood with a grunt. Triple bolt, reinforced. No one's getting through that unless you let 'em. Maggie nodded, inspecting the new hardware. The brushed steel gleamed against the dark red of her freshly painted door. A small brass plate below the knob read, Harper. Just that. No flourish. No flourish needed. Appreciate you coming so quick, she said. Word travels, he replied. And after what they pulled? He tipped his cap. Glad to be on the right side of a front door for once. When he left, Maggie stood there for a moment, fingertips grazing the new lock. The sun caught the edge of the brass, warm despite the chill still clinging to the porch railings. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key. Not the new one, the old one. A dull, worn thing, Vanessa's copy. Evan's original. Passed back and forth like a shared permission slip for trespass. It had scraped her table once when she tried to hide it. It had opened doors without asking. Now she held it like a relic. Not with anger, with resolution. At the edge of the porch, an old donation jar sat atop a folding table. A handwritten sign read, Scrap metal for reuse, not regret. Lily had drawn a cartoon magnet on the sign, complete with spark lines and a smiling bolt. Maggie walked over, dropped the key in. It hit the glass bottom with a tiny clink. Final. Unceremonious. Behind her, Lily clapped, grinning like it was New Year's Eve. Best Christmas gift ever, she said. Honestly, that sound gave me life. Maggie just smiled and walked back to the porch swing. The sound of laughter floated up the block. By noon, neighbors had begun arriving, not with questions, Just pie. Mrs. Johansson brought pecan. The Halper twins showed up with an oddly festive tofu casserole. Even Whitaker stopped by with a lemon chess tart, muttering something about respect owed where respect's due. Maggie opened her door again and again, letting them in, coat on the hook, smile steady. There were no speeches, just small talk and slices and the comfort of a space that had stopped needing explanation. From the kitchen window, Lily pointed suddenly. Incoming? A sleek silver SUV crept slowly past the house, Vanessa behind the wheel, sunglasses too large for her face, jaw tight. Evan sat stiff beside her, hands on his lap like a child in timeout. They didn't stop. Didn't wave. Didn't blink. The SUV turned at the end of the street and disappeared without ceremony. Maggie returned to the sink, rinsed a serving knife. Dried it slowly. Lily came to stand beside her. Think she's gonna try again? The girl asked. Maggie looked out the window at the empty curb. She won't get far. Not anymore. The doorbell rang again. Another neighbor with cranberry muffins and a tight, sincere hug. Someone else called from the sidewalk, complimenting her porch lights. The house buzzed, not with chaos, but with warmth. Laughter and clinking plates. Boots neatly stacked by the door, a new kind of full. Elaine arrived just before sunset with mulled cider and a satisfied smile. Legal mail's on the way, she said in Maggie's ear. Just formality now. But I thought you'd want the cider first. I always want the cider first, Maggie replied. They sat on the porch together, the evening casting long shadows across the street. Lily came out with a mug of her own. She didn't film anything. She didn't need to. The jar still sat near the steps, half full now. Old screws, mystery keys, rusted hinges. Maggie looked down at it once more, then out toward the quiet, snow-dusted street. Her home no longer questioned her belonging. Her locks no longer allowed intrusions. Her space, at last, was hers again. She looked at Elaine, then Lily, then back to the horizon. The last light of day touched the new hardware on the door. She took a sip of cider and whispered, soft, sure, not sad. Keys retired. Space reclaimed. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and old paper. Maggie sat at the head of the table. Her table now, undisputed, with the trust packet laid out in front of her. Lily sat across from her, feet tucked under the chair, trying not to fidget. Her laptop was open, a half-finished email to her college advisor sitting untouched on the screen. Elaine clicked her pen and looked up. Whenever you're ready. Maggie exhaled, not because she was unsure, but because the weight of permanence always arrived quietly. She uncapped the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name at the bottom of the updated trust document, Margaret Elaine Harper, in black ink. Beneath the new clause, named successor, Lily Jane Harper. Elaine slid the second page in place. Next is the education addendum. Maggie nodded. It's all there? Elaine smiled. Scholarships, local kids only, trade schools included, not just universities. Good, Maggie murmured. They should have options. Another signature. Another exhale. Elaine pulled out her notary seal, pressed it into the lower right corner of each page with crisp finality. The soft pop of the embossing echoed like a gavel. Lily's voice was quiet. That's it? Maggie looked up at her. That's everything that matters. Elaine gathered the papers into her leather case, filed and protected. No one touches it unless you say so. She stood, nodding once toward Lily, then leaned down and gently touched Maggie's shoulder. You didn't just outlast them, you outwrote them. The doorbell rang. Pastor Daniels stood outside, scarf wrapped twice around his neck, holding a small box with a red ribbon. I'm not here for pie, he said, smiling. Though, if you insist, I won't leave hungry. Maggie let him in. He glanced at the document still on the table and gave a slow nod. "Quite the covenant," he said. "Just overdue," she replied. He looked around the house. The sun through the window lit the hardwood in gold. A few pine needles clung to the carpet near the baseboard where the Christmas tree had been. Peace hung in the air, not as decoration, but residue. "You know," he said, "you didn't just claim a house, you saved something bigger." Maggie tilted her head. "You gave people permission," he continued, "to speak, to stand, to demand their name be remembered where others tried to erase it." He set the small box down beside her mug. "That's not resilience. That's resurrection." She didn't reply, only placed her hand over the ribbon. By sunset, Daniels had gone. Elaine, too. The house had gone quiet. Lily returned to her laptop, and this time she didn't hesitate. She uploaded the final video. Not courtroom clips, not humiliation montages, just moments. The frost on Maggie's boots, the chair pulled away, the papers signed, the porch swing creaking as Maggie watched the street she had shoveled for 40 winters. The video ended with Maggie's speech at church, and the crowd rising to their feet, not in spectacle, but in solemn understanding. Lily typed the caption slowly. "My grandma taught me what strength looks like. It looks like this." She clicked post. Within hours, it spread. Across forums, across platforms, women in garden gloves, men in porch chairs, teenagers with film reels and captions that read, "She didn't lose, she reclaimed." The comments flooded in. "This healed something I didn't know needed healing." "She brought her own damn chair." "May we all have a Maggie in our corner." "She didn't just stand up, she sat down and stayed." Maggie read them slowly. Not for praise, but to witness what clarity could do when it was finally allowed to speak. That night, Lily brought out a pot of tea and 2 slices of leftover pecan pie. They ate on the couch, knees tucked close, the snow just beginning to fall again outside. Maggie whispered it then, her final truth. Not for Lily's benefit, not for vengeance, just for the story to close in the right place. "They erased my seat," she said softly, "so I built my own table." A beat. Then she looked up, the corners of her mouth tilting, not with satisfaction, but with peace. "And when they took away my chair," she said, lifting her cup as if in a silent toast, "I brought movers to remind them." She sipped. Warm. Sure. "I never left the room to begin with,"